Okay, I think everybody's on. All right, well, welcome once again, students. We're really happy to have you all here today and listen to our Arts and Entertainment panel, which is sponsored by Sony Pictures Entertainment. So thank you so much. And then just reminders for students that we are giving away more gift cards, more scholarships, generously sponsored by Cormark International. So please make sure that you're active in the chat, you're asking questions. I'll be going through some questions myself, but please make sure if you have anything that you want to bring up, if the panelists say anything that you're very interested in, please make sure to use the Q&A, please make sure to use the chat, and we can go ahead and address those questions too. But yeah, without further ado, I will let our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. So today we have Quincie Li and then Don McCoy. So welcome. Yeah, Quincie, do you want to go ahead and start first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for having me here. My name is Quincie. I am a literary manager at Kaplan, Perrone Entertainment, which basically means I represent television and film writers and directors. And so, we help them navigate their careers and, help them find jobs and, go about making careers in the entertainment industry.
Thank you, Quincie. And then Don.
Hello, everyone. My name is Don McCoy. I'm a talent acquisition specialist for Sony Pictures Entertainment. And essentially, I am the support to our productions with all of our below-the-line hiring. So that's for roles like line producers, department heads, everyone on the crew. So that can be anywhere from 1 role to 150 roles. So I fill them all. And I have over 10 years of experience in the entertainment industry, working in those type of roles myself. And I'm excited to be here and share some of my experience and learn more about all of you.
So thank you, Dawn. So I think one of the first questions I have is very basic, very introductory, but can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and how, you realized that you wanted to get into this field? I know entertainment, right? Arts, we're in LA, so it's a big field. But I know that there's a lot of different ways that you can start, getting those interests.
For myself, I'm actually second generation entertainment professional. So I was essentially one of those lucky people, like kind of born into it, born and raised in LA. I knew early in my career, I would say through exposure, that I wanted to be in the business, because when I would audition for things and I didn't get the role, I still wanted to be in the room. So that's when I knew I was definitely passionate about it. I still wanted to be a part of the crew, even if we're only in 3rd grade and, I didn't get the Dorothy role.
Nice. So it was always a passion for you. That's really awesome.
Early on for me.
Very different for me. I, didn't know I wanted to do this. I didn't even know entertainment was an industry, really. It's actually kind of funny, I guess, and relevant to what you guys do, because I realized I wanted to work in this industry when I was in college, and I actually took a class in college. I was a communications major. I took a class in college that ended up being about television. I'd always loved TV. I loved watching TV. And being in this class made me realize, beyond the writers and actors and directors that make television, there's a whole industry of people who, help them do that. And so that's kind of when the light bulb turned on for me. And, it's a perfect mix of entertainment, but also, of business. And I never thought I was a writer or director or anything like that. So realizing there was a place to support those people and still be a part of this industry, that was really exciting for me. So that's when I realized.
Very nice. So just kind of going through life, going through college, and you happen to find this really amazing class that kind of stuck with you. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm sure very similar to some of our students in the chat or in the Zoom as well, just kind of, finding what, feels good for them as they're in college, right? So finding that passion. Awesome. So another question that I have for you all, we know that it's not a linear track whatsoever, right? A lot of the times to college and career, even if you do really know what you like and you know what you're passionate about. So can you kind of talk about those beginning steps and those beginning jobs, whether that was in college or out of college, when you're starting to make those first steps into this career field?
Definitely say early on, I did a lot of working for free, interning, asking, can I just be in the room? I'll sweep the floors, I'll, whatever, clean up, things like that. So I would definitely say like production assistant type of things. those were my like early roles. Low budget productions, commercials, music videos. Those were the only type of productions my mentors actually would give me access to early in my career because I was still learning. But yeah, those are, I would say, smaller things. Student projects, working with friends, volunteering, and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely those student projects. Those are really big. I think a lot of the time students don't realize like those things that they do on campus are very important.
They are.
Yeah, and then for me, definitely also did a lot of internships, also for free. And I think now most people pay their interns, so that's nice. But yes, not when I was an intern. I did a lot of that, and I think a very common pathway for a lot of people in the industry, at least on this end, is as they start as assistants. And so that's what I did when I first got done with college. Is I was an assistant at ICM, which used to be one of the big agencies and now is merged with CAA. And I was an assistant there and then sort of bounced around being an assistant at various places until I realized I wanted to be a manager, and then worked hard to get promoted.
More unpaid internships. But yeah, I think like you said, Quincy, a lot of internships are paid now. But yeah, definitely for students wondering how to break into the industry, right? You just got to get your foot in the door and kind of see what's there. What are those entry-level roles to let people know who you are, right? And that you are in it because you love it and that you're really willing to put the work in. So yeah, it's really important. So for both of you, did you major in anything related to like arts and entertainment, or was it a completely different turn once you graduated?
Yeah, I was in English and communications double major. Yeah, I wasn't a film major, which a lot of people find confusing, but I don't know. I just wasn't interested in majoring in film. But I don't think my personal major was that relevant for my job. You certainly don't have to major in film or in media or something to work in this field. I do think there are a lot of transferable skills you learn in college that apply to working and just sort of learning how to navigate the workforce, but it wasn't directly transferable. But certainly, plenty of people who come into the industry do major in film or production or cinema or something like that. And that works well too.
So a little bit of variety.
Yeah, for sure.
I also majored in communications as well. I think it was extremely helpful. I did not get my degree in any film arts or anything like that, but I think what I learned and how to work with others, how to articulate myself, working with people from all different backgrounds and things I learned in college, like on hands-on type of experience, like we kind of mentioned, that was super helpful in my career. So not necessarily the degree particularly itself. And I would say the same for even when I meet young people that are recent graduates. I mean, you can learn everything about the business, but it's not until you really get out there in your career, and you try things out, that's when you kind of know. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super important to know, right? Like learning in the classroom is one thing, or learning theory or how things are ideally supposed to go, right? We know that doesn't always happen in the workplace, and it looks very, very different, right? Because you're working with other humans, right? And everyone has their own personality, their own work style. So it is a lot of kind of trial and error as you get into any industry and kind of seeing, what you can learn, the mentors that can help you along the way and things like that. Yeah. So you guys both touched on transferable skills, right? And that being a big part in just, learning the industry. What would you say are some of like the biggest skills, the biggest things that you're using in your day-to-day that you didn't necessarily, right, like learn in school, but now that you're a professional, that that are very valuable?
I would say problem solving. And then how well how well you work under pressure. So when things are changed, so in our industry, it's always evolving, changing constantly. I mean, minute by minute, I can get a call for something changing. So how do you, how do you adjust and pivot? Are you agile or are you rigid? So those type of things, that's super helpful in your career. But I would definitely say problem solving is a great transferable skill that you can gain in and out of college. And most definitely, how well do you work under pressure? For sure, when you have a deadline in a short amount of time to execute and you want to be efficient and well, so that's very useful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think like Dom was saying earlier, I think teamwork is a really big skill, because no matter what you do in your career, you're inevitably working with other people. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned about this industry is it's just a team effort always, and even if there's sort of one person who's fronting a project. Nothing gets accomplished without many people working together towards the same goal. So you know, you always have to be working with others. And then also I think resourcefulness is really important, you know, taking advantage of you know, if you're in college, whether it's like the opportunities on campus or off or in the local area, and just figuring out there's like a scrappiness to or maybe like an assertiveness that I think is very transferable, where if you are the student who's taking advantage of the opportunities around you, if you're the student who's making the effort to reach out to other people, I think that kind of forwardness translates well into the industry.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about that. Like, how do you make yourself stand out in such a competitive industry, right? It's popular. A lot of people want to get in it. Some people have connections, some people don't. So how do you really make yourself, you know, known and noticed?
Yeah, I think passion goes really far. You know, I think this is an industry that if you're not passionate about it, you'll just eventually do another job because it is very competitive and difficult. I think that goes really far. And also I think just not being afraid to make the first move, whether it's, you know, reaching out to someone on LinkedIn or an alumni or emailing somebody. I think I remember when I was that age, I think I was always afraid of bothering people, you know, and that's something I've really grown out of as I gotten older. But back then I remember I didn't want to waste people's time, and but that's a bad attitude. Don't have that attitude. You know, you should like send the email, reach out to people, ask people how they can help connect you to other people, because it is an industry where, you know, it is all about the networking and the connections. And but everyone also had to rely on that to get to where they are. So I find that there's like a generosity with sharing information and helping other people. So just don't be afraid to reach out and then make the first move.
Yeah, that's super important. I think networking. I think that's the theme of today, right? Building connections. Super, super important. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question for me again?
Oh, yeah. So in such a competitive industry, how did you make yourself stand out, make yourself known, so that you get the job, the part, whatever it is?
I would definitely say, that is very difficult, like you said, because it is a lot of people. I would say just fortitude, the follow through. So just like she said, if you're going to reach out, email, okay, that's step one, but that's also, there's no guarantee you get a reply. What's the next step? Do you have a plan B, C, D? And you should. I would definitely say, yeah. So the follow through, fortitude, and just sticking with it, because realistically, it is extremely competitive. And I, when I do get the opportunity to remind candidates, I do remind them, because it just gives them a realistic scope of what they're, you know, kind of working against, I guess you can say. But that way you don't get discouraged. So let's, for example, if I post a role, let's say just for an internship, if it's in a creative department, I'm going to get 500 plus applicants within 48 hours. Easy. That's just our business. That's just one role, you know, and that's an internship. So just, you know, not to discourage people, but yeah, you do need to kind of stand out, figure out, I would say, what sets you apart from everyone else. So why are you different? Passion is very important, but it's one of those like very active words that people are using often right now. So people hear that word a lot. Everyone's passionate in the business, but why are you different? What is it different about your passion? You know, whatever that is, whatever you decide that is for that individual. But yeah, what's different about you that's not the same as everyone else? Kind of discovering your personal, you know, thing.
Yeah, like your own brand, whatever that is, whatever you want to have people know about you. Yeah, it's super important. I think that's something we try to talk to students a lot too, right? Like now is the time that you're figuring out who you are. So what is that foot or face that you want to put forward in the professional world? So it's important.
Yeah, like maybe working well with others or working in teams is a strength that sets you apart. Not everyone can do that. So, you know, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm also hearing a lot of like planning, right? And making sure, right, that you're not just going into it blind, you're doing some research and really having a pretty good footing on what you're setting out to do, right? You can't just go out there and submit resumes and not really know what your focus is. Because like you said, 500 other people are submitting for one role. So it's really important that there's a lot of planning and intention behind it too. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's really important because sometimes when people reach out to me and you know, they're like, I really want to work in entertainment, but it's such a big industry. There's so many different facets to it that it's always easier for me to help folks. Like, I'm really interested in being on set and working production, or I'm really interested in you know, working for a producer, or, you know, whatever it may be. I think being able to be specific and you know, sort of do the research on your own as to what targeted areas are interesting to you, that's a good advice. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and then it does showcase that passion, right? So you're saying you're passionate about XYZ. Tell me, show me more. Show me how that passion is playing out for you. So yeah, super, super important. We do have another question in the chat about any setbacks that you two have encountered trying to get into the industry, or any point that, you know, was very discouraging, and maybe you were taking a second look at maybe going into arts and entertainment.
Oh, I have a lot of those stories, but I'll let I don't want to scare people, but definitely a lot of setbacks for sure. But I would say one, I would say experience being a female in a very male-dominated industry. Let's say I had a particular project, it was a sports project. That was very intimidating. I actually cried on set. But after that, in that experience, I mean, my skin was pretty thick after, you know, once you're yelled at a few times for making a mistake or just so small, you know, you grow thick skin, you know, not to take things personal. You know, it's just business. We have to be on time. You know, we have to take this serious, things like that. But a lot of major setbacks. I made a lot of mistakes. And I didn't necessarily always have someone there to tell me, hey, that's wrong. I had to just trial and error. So that is very normal in our business. Even someone like myself, kind of being born with a little extra connections, let's say, versus the average person. Yeah, it still happens. So
yeah, I think I agree. I think, you know, being a female in a male dominated industry is really hard. I think being a person of color in an industry dominated by white people is really hard. I think both of those combined are even harder. And it's probably like that, I think, in every industry. But I think this industry is also a lot of soft skills, right? It's very personality based. And because of that, it's very easy to feel like, yeah, you're not in the boys club, or you're left out of something, or you're not sort of given the clues to the test, but for no fault of your own, you know. And I think that's really, really difficult, and that definitely you know, felt like that many times. But I don't know, I always go back to like why I wanted to do this in the first place. I think it's really important that our industry is diverse and consists of a lot of different types of people. And but to create real change, like, you kind of have to be one of the people to do that yourself, and know that you're entering into an industry that's, you know, kind of adverse to you. That's definitely not for everyone. I think it's really difficult, but I think like that gives me a sense of purpose also every day, that beyond just like the fact that I love movies and television, that you know, I think there's really something to what we're doing that's important. But it's really, really challenging.
All great points to make, right? Being a person of color, being a woman in a male dominated space, it's all, you know, layers, and on top of being a new professional, right? New grads trying to figure out their way in the world. But one thing that I do want to let our students know is, you know, many of our students are first generation college students, so that also comes with a lot of challenges. So students on the call, I want you to know that if you're finding these first few steps challenging, just know that you have that strength, you have that ability to do it already, because you're doing it now, right? You're taking these steps into college, you're navigating classes, you're looking for resources, you're here today, right, to learn a lot from different professionals. So if you are feeling intimidated or a little bit scared, just know that you're doing it now. And it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the more comfortable, the more confident you're going to be. So really keep asking all these questions and asking for advice, because that's also a key part, right? That's exactly what we want you to do, is ask the questions. So you're all doing great. One big thing, right? We're always talking about connections, networking. Can you take it back a little bit when you first started kind of doing that networking, and how that felt for you? How did you kind of get yourself to come out of your shell, knock on doors, send those cold call emails, do those informational interviews? Because I know it can be very daunting for our students, and for any student.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think back. I think the ones that were a little easier, just if you have some sort of connection to somebody, so it's not as cold, and so you feel and I know obviously, you know, I didn't know anyone who worked in this industry, so I know it's a little scary to be like, yeah, I genuinely don't know anyone who does this. I think alumni networks are a really good resource. You know, I think inevitably at every college, like, somebody does something in entertainment, and I find like that's a very, you know, people are just really generous when you're also an alum at the same college for the most part. So I think that was easy. And then I would say when you're first starting to network, if you have like a nice chat with somebody, it's always good to end with a, you know, like, thank you so much for talking to me. I was really interested in what you had to say, and this thing you brought up sounds really interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. Is there anyone else you could introduce me to who you know, like, does that? And I think when you can sort of have a chain of somebody introducing you to somebody else, who then introduces you to somebody else, you can build up the network very quickly, but also feel like you don't have to be reaching out cold.
So start with those like friendly connections, those friendly places that you know that people are going to be welcoming. They want to be there.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, I think people love when you compliment them on their work. So if nothing else and you have no connection, you know, just start with a, hey, I love the show you worked on, or I'm a big fan of these things, you know, like that. People like to be complimented. So just start polite and friendly.
Yeah, like any other connection, right? Yeah. Yeah, and Dom, the same question. Can you think about those initial networking moments where it was a little scary?
I would definitely say I kind of networked through labor. So like after working, interning, kind of proving myself, then I felt a little more comfortable to then ask. But honestly, I think her advice was great with staying connected to friends and alumni and people who are also like yourself trying to break into the industry. You guys have to stay in touch. Check back in with each other. Like it's almost like a group project. Maybe if you do it for 6 months, hey, I've been applying for jobs here, trying this. What are you guys seeing out there? Also, keep your eyes and ears open to the business and the industry. What's happening? What new productions are happening? Are we on a strike? Does that affect you? Or what are you applying for? All of those things. So you kind of need to continue that method of like being a student of the industry. And that's super, super helpful because like she said, if you know a little background of the person, the show, that project they worked on, if you compliment it, that's great, but know a little bit more than just like, hey, that was an awesome thing, but why was it awesome? Oh, wow, you worked on that show for 8 years. You guys, you know, you got that show picked up past 100 episodes, you know, whatever the case is, just have those kind of details ready and prepared. So like, you know what you're talking about because you're obviously already passionate, but just have the, you know, the education behind and knowledge behind what you're doing when you're networking. So that way, when you do get that opportunity in front of like that senior executive, you don't blow it. And if you do blow it like I have in the past, that's okay. You know, you dust yourself off and you go to plan B, C, and you just continue on. So.
Yeah, that's really important. Like just because somebody doesn't answer the way you want them to, or maybe they don't answer at all, don't take it personally and, you know, move on to the next person. There's somebody that's going to be willing to help you. And there's a couple questions in the chat about like, you know, it's scary. How do you feel like you're not bothering them, or you feel like it's, you know, a favor that they're doing you? But I mean, at the end of the day, if they're willing to answer your questions, then, you know, why not go for it, right? They're putting themselves out there.
Yeah, I think also it's, I would just say like, if you feel like, yeah, it is really scary, I don't want, you know, to take up too much of their time, or obviously they have nothing to benefit from me, you know, I would just say like, just as long as you make it as convenient as possible for the other person, like that's what you can do, right? Like, hey, I will come to your office, you know, I will, if you have 5 minutes to hop on a phone call, you know, like I think that's all you can do, and either people are going to be generous about their time or they're not. If they're not, it's okay. The worst thing someone can do is just not respond.
That's true, right? You have to ask because you never know what's going to come out of it.
Expect no response. That's 90% of the time. People don't have the time to respond. And then if you don't, then you should probably try people around that person. That's another tactic too. So maybe try reaching out to the assistant, their director, their man, you know, their teammates. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I think more like using LinkedIn, right? Looking at people's networks, seeing who they're connected to, right? So students, if you don't have a LinkedIn, definitely you want to take some time to invest in that because that's really how people are connecting now, right? People don't want to be contacted via email as much. It's, hey, message me on LinkedIn, right? So you definitely want to do that. And then we have our last panelist who's joined us. Welcome, Gil. So glad that you could join us today.
My name is Gil Gastelum. I am the founder and president of a management and record label called Cosmica Artists. We're based in Los Angeles. My office is in Boyle Heights, just right next to downtown. Next year will be 20 years that I started the company. And yeah, I've been in the music business for over 30 years myself, and started the company when I felt like there was a lot of people that were not being considered to be a recording artist or a viable recording artist simply because of the color of their skin or just access. And I wanted to be able to provide that for artists. For me, my mantra has always been, if you're if you have the talent, then you deserve a place at the table. And currently, commercially, our biggest artists are Carla Morrison, who's won multiple Latin Grammys, Gabby Moreno, who's also won multiple Latin Grammys. And we have a couple acts such as the Red Pears, who will be playing Coachella next year. And yeah, it's been a real fun ride so far.
Thank you, Gil. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we'll jump back into the questions. I think one thing I do want to ask is the role that mentorship played in your career journey for everybody, right? I know it takes a village a lot of the times, right, to get to where we're at. And so I think it's really important that our students know too that it's okay to reach out and look for mentors, and there's people there that want to help you. So can you, Quincie, if you want to start and maybe talk a little bit about mentorship and the role that it played?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think especially because I started as an assistant, you directly work for somebody, right? And you hope those people can be mentors to you. Definitely had a lot of mentors along the way. I think my first boss was a huge mentor for me because, when I didn't know anything, she was very, very generous about her time and explaining things to me. She's also one of the few Black lit agents at a big agency. And so I just also, again, I think I learned so much about how to navigate this industry as a woman of color through her. And I think if I hadn't worked for her first, I don't know if I would have sort of understood it in the same way, or sort of understood the frustrations or the difficulties. And so she's a big mentor of mine. I think, yeah, I hopefully try to extend that the other way now that, I'm in a position to do so. So yes, definitely. I think it's important to find good mentors, and if for nothing else, just for someone to give you encouragement along the way, because, it is a hard industry. I also think, like, if you don't have a mentor immediately, that's okay too, and like I said, I think a lot of people are sort of entering this together, and there's not always a lot of people in front of you who look like you, who are doing the things you're doing. And if that's the case and you can't find a great mentor, again, like building the community around you, the people who are at the same level as you, people who can give you some support and just encouragement along the way, like that's also a good way to build community. But I do think no matter what, whether it's through mentors or even mentees eventually, or the people around you, having people by your side who can support you through this is really important.
Some different perspectives, right? That's not just support, but to give you a little bit of perspective, maybe check you once in a while, right? To give you a little bit of a reality check if you need that, but to be supportive, right, of your goals and those next steps. Yeah, Dom, what role did mentorship play in your career pathway?
I would say mentorship was important, but I wouldn't say it was that leading for my career. I did have mentors, but then oftentimes people don't have the time to volunteer to mentorship because they're traveling in and out of town. So what I try to do is I try to follow people that kind of from afar, that I may not know directly, but I literally stalk them, whether that was their social page, whatever. There's an executive at Amazon Studios that I've always admired, and this just his career as he's growing and developing. So every time a new article would come out or something, new projects, just kind of following and understanding what's happening with someone that you admire and look up to, and just kind of like trying to lean into either copy paste, or apply some of those strengths to your career. So, and it doesn't always have to be traditionally someone in your industry too. I learned that. There's a lot of people who were near and close within my resource that I didn't take advantage of, and later down realized like, wow, I actually did follow you, and I was like kind of like your shadow in a way. So yeah, it can sometimes come in a unique way, mentorship, I would say. For me, it was.
Yeah, and that's really important for students to know too, because I think when we hear the word mentorship, we think of somebody who's older, who's in exactly the position that we want, or has been doing this for a lot of years. But that doesn't always have to be the case, right? And we have mentors for different stages in our lives as well, and different things that we're trying to do. So it doesn't have to look one way for everybody. Yeah, thank you for that, Dawn. And then same question, Gil, mentorship in your career trajectory.
Yeah, I think both answers are great, and I think are very much applicable. For me, definitely, especially music industry can be very really hard to get into, especially if you don't know anybody. So I think the key thing is it's a lot of times it's who you know, it's not what you know. And that certainly was the case for me. It took me probably a little bit longer to get into the business than, like, say, people that grew up here. I'm not originally from LA. I was from Tucson, Arizona, which isn't that far away, but in the music industry, that's about as far as you can get, probably. And so the important thing for me was, again, it was very it was a little bit of both of the answers. You know, it's like you learn certain things from folks that that you bring with you, as far as like learning about that work ethic, learning of you know, meeting the people that are in the industry that you want to be in. So having those folks and in your life is so key. And so it's these kind of things, these seminars and the, you know, getting to know folks, going to mixers. Even for me, I'm 53 years old now, and it's so important for me to still go to, like, say, an industry mixer to meet somebody that perhaps I haven't met before, and I meet somebody and it's like, oh my God, this is such a great opportunity for me to not only get to know somebody new, but also to possibly work with somebody in the business that I haven't worked with before. So it's, again, it's like opening up those branches. So mentorship is absolutely, for me, it was incredibly important for me. Otherwise, I don't think that I would have been able to get into the business that I'm in.
So it was about learning more, growing more, and not just, yeah, I just got to where I was going to be and that was it. It was about furthering yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, even now. Yep.
And that's one of the questions too in the chat. You know, you guys are very well established in your careers, and so some of the students have questions are, you know, related to how do you keep that professional growth going once you feel like you've reached, you know, your goal. And I think you touched upon, like, all right, going, you know, to mixers, making sure that you're aware of the different trends in the industry. But if you want to give any, you know, specific examples of what you do personally to make sure that you're constantly growing and you know, keeping up with trends and things.
I mean, for me, definitely, I mean, the music business seems to have just completely changed every 6 months. It seems like it's completely different than it was previously. So it's super important for me to keep up, you know, keep up with trends, and, you know, being able to just, you know, it's constantly reading, meeting people that I've known forever, and learning and listening to, you know, that's a big thing, is listening. And not just listening, but learning from listening. And you know, it's just that thirst. I think if you stop wanting to learn, then I think you become stagnant. And in the business that I'm in, and I'm sure that my colleagues will tell you the same thing, it's like that's akin to like really not being able to keep up with the business, because it's constantly growing, especially with technology. That's one of the things that I struggle with so much. It's changed so much since I first started. You know, who'd have thought that when I first started that people would be streaming music rather than buying CDs or cassettes. I mean, it's just, and that was such a massive change. And if I wouldn't have kept up, I definitely think I'd be out of the business a long time ago. So it's absolutely important to learn the latest, whether it's technology, whether it's the new younger generation going into the business. You should never think that you're too old to continue to learn new things.
Absolutely right. Whether we're staying in school or outside of school, right, we're constantly learning, and especially if it's something that you're passionate about, you want to make sure that, right, you're abreast of all the new developments and everything that's going on. So very true.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dawn, do you want to go next?
I would definitely say I agree with Gil. Definitely always constantly learning, understanding we're all students of the industry every day. You know, even when you grow, and like you said, you've accomplished all those goals and you're at the highest point of your career. Staying connected and, you know, up to date on where the industry is, the business, whether it's the people, the trends, those type of things help you stay in the business. Because it's one thing to get the opportunity, but to keep it and stay in the business is the harder part. So I would definitely say if you're if you're too comfortable in your role and it's pretty easy, it's time to grow. you should definitely enjoy what you do. You should be passionate about it, but it should also challenge you. So if at any point you're in a role and it's kind of easy, it's predictable, then in this business, if it's predictable and easy, it's time to grow. It's time to evolve. So knowing when it's time to grow. So that's super, super important, I would say.
Very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
You become stagnant, right? If you just do the easy stuff.
Yeah, or staying too long. That was one of my challenges in my career, staying in a role too long. Let's say if it was an executive assistant, you know, I've learned everything I need to learn here, and I'm still here 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, you know, that it's time to move forward. Whether it's supporting another executive, it doesn't matter what that means, but you have to pivot sometimes and just continue to move. Like I said, being stagnated is kind of like, it's gonna hurt, definitely hurt anyone. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a relatively newer thing in a lot of industries. I think before, back in the day, it's like, oh, you find a company and you're going to retire there. And that's not necessarily the goal anymore, and not the best way for people to grow in their profession. So yeah, definitely a pivot. And then Quincie, yeah, same question.
Yeah, no, I think what everyone else said is totally correct. Yeah, I also think yes, you're constantly learning, you're constantly networking, you're constantly trying to stay ahead. I think, you know, tech definitely has had a huge effect on film and TV as well. You know, like if we didn't take Netflix seriously, you know, back in the day, then you're probably missing out on a lot of business now, right? And so you're constantly trying to evolve in that way as well. So I think that's a really good point about staying up to date with technology. And I would also say, like, there comes a point in your career where for the longest time you were only sort of networking upwards or trying to network upwards and then sort of at your level maybe, and then you know, as you grow, it's also really important to network downwards to the next generation, right? And extend the hand the other way. And so for all of you who are just starting to, you know, again, like, you know, being nervous about reaching out to people above you and feeling like there's not anything for you, it eventually flips, you know. Somebody, for example, who hired me when I was an intern is now trying to become a director, right? And she reaches out to me often because our sort of places as an industry has switched in a different way, right? And so I would say everything can lead to something else, and it's important to constantly be giving back in the other direction as you're growing upwards as well. And that's sort of a different way to grow.
Yeah, so again, it's going to look differently for everybody, but just making sure that you have some momentum going, whatever that is for you. There's some momentum going, you're constantly moving. Okay. And then one question I do want to ask everybody is, can you give me or give the students kind of a snapshot of what your daily life at work looks like? What are some things that you're going through? Just so they can get an idea of, like, I like this position, maybe this is what I want to do, but maybe this day to day, maybe not.
Say my role day to day, it's always changing constantly. Like, you know, I have special events like these where I get to meet individuals and speak on panels, and go and meet with new nonprofits who are trying to get into the business and connect, you know, young people. But then I would say in office, I'm at a desk, I'm looking through hundreds of emails, I'm getting calls from production saying, hey, there was a tornado in Australia and now we have to find a new location in this person. And now I'm trying to fill that need. So I'm constantly trying to keep a active pipeline of talented people who want to be in the industry or who are currently working. So kind of a lot of networking. My role requires a lot of networking. I'm always on the phone, whether it's interviewing candidates, meeting them for coffee. Even if I don't have that particular position open at the moment, there's a chance I will get that call at some point. So I would say heavy networking for me. It can, even in my career now, it's still intimidating. It's still awkward, you know, so just get used to feeling awkward. So what? Who cares? Everyone's awkward. We were all weird at some point, you know, even if we look cool now. So just remember that. And no matter the title, just not letting people's titles get in the way sometimes, even your own title, and just not being above or beneath any role, task, or anything like that. So if it means we got to get our hands dirty and get a writer's room open, and I don't have a right support team, then I'm in there wiping down the table, whatever that means, so that we, you know, the writers have a place to create. So I would say my day to day it changes, but definitely people. I'm always connection with people, careers, trying to help people, whether it's give them tips, you know, opportunities and also trying to create new opportunities. So I'm always trying to grow. I'm trying to grow now. So yeah. I know that was kind of crazy. I wish it was just a one way, just one straight answer, but yeah.
I know, right? I think we'd all love that. Just here's one answer, here's the template, and we can go. But yeah, we know it's never that easy.
Never boring, though. I will say that. Never boring. There's always something new happening. So that I like to stay, it's exciting, keeps me on my toes.
Thank you, Dom. And I really like what you said, like, don't let your own title get in the way, because I think that can also be very intimidating. Starting at like, oh, I don't have the right connections or the right amount of years to ask this person this question. But right, you got to get out of your own way sometimes.
You get one shot. If you're in the room, you're supposed to be there. So just always remember that. I don't care if you're sweeping the floors or like I was wiping the tables down. If you're there, you're meant to be there. So definitely ask, because you may not get that chance again. So take advantage for sure. For sure.
So thank you, Dom. And then Quincie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my day to day, I always joke that I'm just constantly staring at my inbox, which is probably kind of true. Yeah, so I spend a lot of time sending emails and a lot of time on the phone. I remember when I first started, I thought picking up a phone was extremely scary and I did not want to speak to anybody on the phone, but now I do it and I call strangers truly all the time. So that's a big part of the job, and just going to a lot of meetings. I think that's kind of what it comes down to. I always say, like, I think my favorite part of the job, and the best part is something I get to do every day, which is advocacy. And the crux of my job is just I represent a lot of people who I think are really, really talented, and every day I get to call somebody about that person and talk about how talented they are, and that's the part of the job I love the most. And then the part that is different every single day and is tricky and is always high volume is just sometimes the client needs something, sometimes a disaster is happening on another client project. Sometimes you're trying to get a different kind of job, right? And so I think the biggest difference between this job and probably a lot of other careers is it's the volume. It's just extremely high volume at all times, and everything moves very quickly. And we work a lot of hours, and if a client needs something and it's a Saturday, like I have to go do that thing, so there's a little bit of unpredictability, I guess, in the hours sometimes, but for the most part, yeah, it's just a lot of calls, emails. There's also a lot of reading of scripts and watching of movies and short films and stuff like that as well. Yeah, kind of a mix of all those things.
So what I'm hearing is that it's not a 9 to 5. This is not a 9 to 5 industry.
It is not a 9 to 5.
That's something
and even when you're starting, even when it's an entry-level job, I think when I started as assistant, I was probably almost working 8 to 8 every day. It was a lot of hours. Now I try to keep it at like a 9 to 7, but like I said, it depends.
Yeah, good. Last one.
Yeah, definitely not a 9 to 5 job. It every day is definitely as redundant as it sounds, or as obvious as it sounds, I should say. Every day is a different day. I can be like today, I was in about 3 legal calls today, just discussing artist contracts. And then on Thursday, I'm leaving to Mexico City for a big show for one of my artists. It's the end of her tour. So I'm flying there. And again, this sounds all glamorous, but it's a lot of work. I'm going there, and then literally the next morning I'm flying to Spain for the Latin Grammys because one of our acts is nominated for 2 awards. I'm going there, and then I come to find out that the Latin Grammys are at in Spain in the time zone in Spain. In order for them to be live here in LA, is going to start at 11:00 p.m. That's the start of the award show. So and it can be where I'm literally taking out the trash, as I did earlier today. So it's like when you own your own company, it's like again, don't let the title get in your way. It's like whatever you need to do to get the work that needs to be done, whether it's throwing out the trash or going all the way to Spain to support your artist. It runs the gamut of different things that you do on a daily basis, and it's always communicating. I feel like I should work at Google with the amount of emails I get in my Gmail, and you know, and definitely also the amount of phone calls that you get on a daily basis as well. So it always changes. And then again, if you own your own business, never expect to have a true day off. If it happens, it just ends up happening that way.
Yeah, so again, a very unpredictable day. It is not a 9 to 5. I think everybody says they spend a lot of time looking at emails on the phone.
Yeah.
So students, if this is piquing your interest, make sure to follow up. Okay, I think we're right at time. But thank you all so much. This was really great. A lot of really great information, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.